We have Bree Lanham. She is a speech language pathologist from Butler County with extensive experience in early intervention and augmentative and alternative communication. She is passionate about helping children find their voice, whether through speech, signs, or technology, and empowering families and educators to support communication growth in everyday routines. Bree has worked closely with multidisciplinary teams to assess, implement, and train others in the use of AAC systems, focusing on practical, relationship-based strategies that foster connection and independence. She also provides professional development and parent education to make AAC approachable, effective, and meaningful across all environments. I will now turn it over to Bree.
Me okay? Hello? Perfect. Okay. I'm super excited to be here. I love AAC, and I'll teach you all a little bit about what it is and then maybe how you could bring it back home to where you are. If you have any questions along the way, just let me know. I love talking about it. I'm very passionate about it, and hopefully I can make you guys a little passionate about it too. So to start us off, AAC, I'll just give you a little definition. AAC includes all forms of communication other than oral speech. So we're talking about signs, we're talking about pictures, and we're talking about even high-tech AAC that I'll get more into today. AAC, we've abbreviated much like everything else in early intervention. We take augmentative, alternative communication and break it down or abbreviate it into AAC. So it stands for augmentative, which means any communication that adds to our speech. Alternative is something that's anything besides speech. And then communication is the ability to exchange thoughts and ideas. So there are many ways that we can augment and help people communicate. Today, I'm really talking about using AAC in early intervention, but AAC is definitely a tool that helps people of all ages. So you might see an elderly person who might need AAC, and then we've had success with using AAC under 3, and I'll show you some videos and examples of that, our success in Butler County. So anyone can really use AAC. If you can't meet your daily needs with spoken language, you would probably benefit from AAC, or a person on your caseload would. This includes our toddlers in early intervention, children with autism, CP, apraxia. If they can't get the words out or if they're having difficulty communicating, they would be a great candidate to at least explore the option of using AAC with them. We have different forms of AAC, from no tech to low tech up to high tech. I'm going to focus a lot on the high tech today. But as you're exploring high tech, one of the biggest things to remember is that we also have to acknowledge that they might need low tech supports in addition to their high tech. We all use multiple modes of communication every day. We're gesturing, we might be writing, we might be drawing, and then we're also talking. So we can't forget that for children, they would also benefit from multiple modes of communication, such as visual picture support and maybe a high-tech device with voice output. So just some things to consider as you're thinking about AAC. Low-tech examples of AAC, we have several, and I'll show you some visuals for them. The first one being core vocabulary or core pictures. And this is just maybe a core board that you could create. This is an example of just one generic core board that might have core language. And core language is what makes up about 80% of our day-to-day words, or what we would see children under 3 even using. Some core boards, you can also include fringe vocabulary. Fringe vocabulary is that more specific vocabulary like cookie, Pop-Tart, granola bar. You might see some fringe vocabulary added to a core board. There's just many options available for some of these visual supports. So we have a more generic core board here. We can get a little bit more specific if we're working on a specific task and we might need some prepositions like in, out, on, off. You can work on answering yes and no questions with a core board. The best thing about a core board is that the pictures don't move. They're what we refer to as speech therapists, what we refer to as static. So they stay in one place and they really allow the child to learn the motor plan for getting to the word that they're looking for, the word that they want. And then it allows the parent to also be able to not really have to think about where they are modeling the language, because the language is always staying the same on the page. So I'm just going to hop back. We have some other options for visual supports as well, and this is in that low tech or mid tech area. So we have a visual choice board, and that would be an example of that one. Is something like this, where we have a very specific like maybe piece that you could put on the refrigerator, and it would give them access to tell you what they want at snack time, that type of thing. So this is just a choice board, and this is different from a core board. We also in Butler County have a Spanish population that we serve. And so we've had some success with using a core board in addition to using speech generating devices with apps that translate into Spanish or that are in Spanish. So we've had some success with that as well. So we might use both modes. Another form of like low tech is this tactile communication board. I'm sorry to hop around on you guys. I'm going to just go there so that you can see it a little better. And some tactile communication boards or bins, these can be really helpful for those maybe with a visual impairment or multiple impairments. They can also be used for a person who has maybe very low cognition. It can also just be a good jumping off point if you want to explore going down that path. But the idea behind the tactile bin is that these particular items that you put in the bin, they help to represent the activity that might be coming next or the choice that the child makes. And so it includes multiple senses from the body. So for example, a loofah might indicate that they're going to take a bath, and we could put the loofah in their hand. They could feel it. It has different texture. It might even have a little bit of sound. The keys obviously jingle, so we're using our auditory sense. The spoon might indicate that they're transitioning to mealtime. They can hold the spoon. It might be cold to touch. Visually, it might be shiny and reflective. So tactile communication boards can just be really helpful to bridge the gap between someone who might need a little bit more support and who might not be ready for a high-tech device. All right. So I think a lot of you also might be wondering, one more question I'm going to go back to on this particular slide is the picture exchange. So picture exchange communication system is there's a protocol that systematically teaches a child to exchange a picture icon for what they want. And I know a lot of people have heard of this. They've maybe even used a style of PECs. So this is something that a lot of insurance companies might want you to trial before you jump to a high-tech device. But I think that it should be stated that there's a lot of we're kind of moving away from using PECs because there's a lot of limitations with PECs. And I'm not talking about moving away from using visuals, but I'm just talking about the protocol of PECs. It is widely researched, so it's very common. And I think that's why a lot of insurance companies still require that we at least take a look at using PECs. But the problem is those Velcro icons, they move around. They also really only allow a child to use the function of requesting in communication. They don't often allow the child to protest or to greet or to ask questions. And those are all things even children under 3 should be able to do. So sometimes if we're just looking at PECs, we might be limiting the child's ability to use various functions of communication, and we definitely don't want to do that. So I'm going to teach you guys a little bit about how we can bypass that. I'm going to scooch down here. You will not make everybody dizzy, let's hope. So why would we introduce high tech? Because high tech offers robust language. It offers access to robust language. And by that, I mean it offers access to those fringe words that I was talking about earlier, those core words. It offers access to questions, to protests, to greetings. You can talk about various places. So even non-speaking children or pre-verbal children, we don't limit what we model for them in the home. We don't limit the language that we model or the experiences that we give them. And so I think for a long time, we maybe have limited what we allow them access to with language, just to make things more simple. But AAC has come a long way, and it is much easier for people to use now. I think people are even just more tech savvy now than they have been historically, and that just opens up a whole new world. So I think the biggest takeaway, if you take away nothing else, is that because we don't limit language that we model verbally to verbal children, let's try not to limit language that we model using an AAC device as well. So some examples of high tech, I'll show you here in a second, but we at Butler County started our high tech lending library with a series of 10 iPads. And on those iPads, we were able to put on a few communication apps for parents to trial and for therapists to trial with the families. So one of them being Proloquo, which is that cute little owl that's waving. We also have Touch Chat on there. We have TD Snap. And so TD Snap is actually short for Toby Dynavox, and Toby Dynavox and Pranky Romic are kind of like originals in the AAC or high-tech AAC world. They've developed now, instead of just devices, they've developed apps that you can just download to an iOS system or a PC tablet as well. So parents have options now that maybe they didn't have access to before. So I think they've really opened up access for people. So anyway, at the board, we kept it simple, and we have an iPad in here. We put a case on it. We put the apps on it. Our tech department keeps track of it, and we check it out. And that's it. We've tried to keep it super simple. We don't have a bunch of different types of devices, but we used ARPA funds to purchase our first 10. We've added an additional 10, maybe 12 to the inventory, and they're in constant rotation in Butler County. So they're being used, and I think it's just really great to see. So I think I'm starting to make the case that you can definitely use this in early intervention, but I'm going to give you guys some examples by going through some myths and facts. I think when you think of AAC, some people really are open to the idea, and some people need a little bit more convincing, and that's okay. I have to do the same thing with parents if I introduce it as well. Some parents are open to the idea, and some parents are a little more hesitant. So, and they give me all of these reasons and then some, so I'll just go over a few of them with you. All right. So myth or fact, children need to show that they're ready to use an AAC device. Anybody know? Myth. Yeah, it is a myth. We should always presume competence and recognize, a child's potential. They deserve access to as many words as possible. And the greatest thing, I think, that the greatest aha moment that I had as a clinician was with a parent, and I'll show you her video here down the line. But I told her, I said, on the device, you have access to language on here. And Colin has access to language on here. When you're just talking with him, you're the only one with access to language. And that made her go, wait, what? Or, you mean he did? Yeah, like she just went through all the emotions. And I think it was such an aha moment for her. And she decided, oh, well, can you bring one next time? And I was like, absolutely, we'll get started right away. And she used it, and he went to preschool with it. So, I mean, I think a lot of people have, her biggest thought was like, oh, he's probably just not going to talk because of that. But that's obviously another myth that we'll get to. Children who use alternative and devices might never speak verbally. And obviously, like I was just sharing about Colin's mom, this is a huge myth. I think this is the biggest myth that parents give me, is that, well, if he doesn't have a reason to talk, then maybe he won't talk. And the research just really doesn't support it. The Walters et al. Completed an intervention study indicating that even using AAC with early intervention and with toddlers does not hinder their speech and language development. So I also put a couple of links on here to other articles and research that would support that. The next myth or fact is that my client is speaking, but no one understands him. Maybe a high-tech AAC device could work. And this is definitely a fact. A lot of our individuals who are really unintelligible, difficult to understand, or lack that clarity of speech would really benefit from using an early intervention device, like a device in their early intervention years, just so that we can decrease frustration. I feel like I hear so often, he's throwing things, he's mad, he's angry, he's melting down. And if we give them a means of communication, sometimes we can work with them and with OT and support them all around and kind of give them a voice, give them a way to protest more appropriately rather than throwing things and melting down. So I'm going to show you a video on the next slide. This is actually a video that was our first AAC lending use of our lending device in Butler County when I first started. This was a couple of years ago. And this is with a little guy named Connor. And Connor's mom is going to be talking to him in the video. And you're going to just notice Connor's speech is difficult to understand. So let's see if I can. In Connor's video, he's definitely, he's the one who understands 100% of what he's saying. But mom probably understands about 75% if we're lucky. And I understood even less. And he always had so much to say. and so much intention behind his communication. So we gave him a voice. He went on to preschool. He no longer needs a device, but it was just a great tool in my tool belt to offer to mom. And it gave her so much more opportunity to model language with him and grow his vocabulary in those early years. So there's just so many positives that can come from using it early. The next myth or fact, as you can see, is there are no prerequisites to introducing AAC. Again, this is definitely a fact. We can, AAC, we don't need any prerequisite skills to using a high-tech AAC device. Now, I will tell you there's a caveat to that. If it's not a good fit for a child or a family, then it's just not a good fit, and that's okay. You come to that realization by trying it and not discounting it or excluding that as an option before you even get there. But I think a lot of people feel like if a child doesn't have good joint attention, that they may not be a good candidate for it. And if you hear nothing else from me today, you can get joint attention with your device and with the right motivating activity following the child's lead. You can definitely get there. My next video is of one of my favorite little people. She has autism. She was diagnosed very early. She had very limited joint attention for most activities, except for our sensory motor activities. So, and that's pretty common under 3. So I'll show you her video, and this is also mom interacting with her. I don't have any videos of me really interacting because from day one, I'm putting that device in the parent's hand. It's not for me to use, it's for the parent and the child to use and to build that relationship with each other.
Okay, so there you go.
I think it's yeah. Okay, well, I'll translate. So Penny's getting in and out of her swing. I'm going to go to the next slide so it stops talking. She's getting in and out of her swing, and on the device, she has a few pictures. She probably has access to 20 icons on her display, but we're using go and stop, and we're using it with this swing. So mom is modeling go, and then every time that Penny wants to go, she gets out of the swing, she comes over, and she pushes go on the device. Sorry. I don't want to take a lot of credit for this one because I also worked with her ABA provider to implement and use the device. And I think that helped immensely in terms of carryover because she went to ABA every single day. And they gave her a means of communication and we worked together and it was amazing. So we have another myth or fact. Since they aren't talking yet, I should maybe only give them access to a few pictures on the page. This is another, you probably already guessed it, a myth. We definitely want to give them a large grid or access to as much language as possible as early as possible. We can always use the strategy of hiding buttons to make it a more manageable experience for everybody involved. Sometimes parents need that for the first few visits, and then we start to open things up as they need it. My mindset that I try to get parents to adopt is if you're saying a word to the child, you might as well show them the word on the device and give them a visual representation of the language too. So on here, this video that's playing is of a little guy named he's going to go jump back and forth with his brother. But I just wanted to show that we didn't limit access on the device to, we opened up all the pictures. He comes back here in a second, and he actually he actually hits the wrong button at one point, and he hears that as he's running away that it's the wrong button, and so then he comes screaming back and he hits the right button, and he amends the communication. So I think that's super cool. There it is. He was using an app called TD Snap, and that's made by Toby Dynavox as well. So it's a great little app. A lot of parents and educators sometimes will say to me, like, the device increases their stimming behaviors for those kids that are on the spectrum. And obviously this needs a little bit of education to those people, but we often find that, you know, autistic users really love to hear their talker. They love to hear their favorite words, and sometimes it's a way for them to process language, or even an event that happened that's meaningful to them. And so it might, you know, oh, I read this book about elephants with mom and she tickled me every time, or, you know, and so I go back and I hit elephant every time. It makes me think of that time, you know, it represents something larger for them. And so I feel like sometimes that's just a mindset that we can talk with parents about, is that it's a way for them to really process and use language. The challenge sometimes for SLPs and developmental specialists is finding the why behind why they're pushing that particular button. But we want to respond to it. We want to expand it. We want to make it purposeful. It's just part of it. Okay, that's not me. Perfect. Just going to use this button. Perfect. So Connor, again, it's not a huge thing that you hear this one, but he has access to all of the transportation on his transportation folder in his talker. And gosh, he loved pushing every button. And then mom would expand it every time. Oh, we have a truck. There's your truck. She might ask him a question about it, that kind of thing. And then he would provide the answer. Mom, yeah, at the end he played them all. But it was just a way for them to have some interaction and engagement. This is Indigo. She's using touch chat. Her buttons are a little bit larger. She does have some dexterity difficulties, difficulty with the fine motor pointing. She likes to use her thumb, and she loved talking about animals. She's also hyperlexic, so I figured that out when she was just reading everything around her. At one point in the video, it goes from mom kind of acknowledging what she's pointing to then quizzing her on what she's pointing at. And so this is a learning curve that's really huge for parents, and it does take a long time for them to really grasp the fact that this is a two-way communication back and forth, and that it's not really a quiz. We want to engage with the child. We want to expand on what they're pointing to. We want to find that it's funny that they point to something new and different and exciting. So I think the biggest takeaway from that particular slide is that you're spending a lot of time in that parent coaching piece, providing support. The developmental specialist is providing support in between those visits. The next slide just talks a little bit about presuming competence, and I include at the very bottom that we're really trying to model various functions of communication. We're trying to get away from getting stuck in requesting only. Requests are very common, and they're very common on the IFSP. in early intervention, but we definitely want to provide education for parents that there is a whole world out there in terms of other ways or other functions of communication. We want them to be able to, say mine using their device, assert that independence, or I want to do it by myself. Those kinds of phrases that we could put into the device. So just really starting to think about the fact that this is more than just cookies. I want cookies. It's more than that. And the high-tech AAC just gives parents and children access to modeling all these different functions of communication. So this is one of the handouts and one of the things that I try to teach parents very, very early on in our relationship with the device. So another myth or fact is high-tech AAC is not always the answer. And I think I sort of hinted at this earlier, but both low tech and high tech can really help a child to boost their communication. The best choice is always going to depend on the child's needs. And we just have to make this an option and explore the option with the family to see what fits them best. So we support AAC users all throughout the day. We're consistently using AAC and modeling AAC during daily routines and activities. I often tell parents at this point, like, the more you use the device, the more your child is going to want to use the device, because that's just going to be how we communicate. And you can get so much more when you kind of phrase it in that way to them. My next one is a little video. This is Colin. Colin's mom was the one who I talked about at the beginning, was pretty hesitant about using AAC, but she got all in. And she started modeling exclamations with the device. She was modeling requests. She was helping him learn, how to change his mind on the device. So we also want to follow their interests. And so bubbles, clearly, for a toddler is a huge interest. Touch Chat offers a great learning grid that I often introduce to parents that has some vocabulary around blowing bubbles. And so it's a nice jumping off point to introduce AAC, and parents kind of love playing bubbles with their kids. We love bringing bubbles because then, they like us. And so it's just a win for everybody involved. We're always trying to give parents, let's keep our devices ready. We have access to it. Make sure it's attached to their Wi-Fi, that type of thing. Available during different routines. There's just so many little things to remind them about. And then at the board, we actually have a charging station, and we try to keep all the iPads attached to the Wi-Fi in the system, so it automatically updates those apps when they roll out new updates. So it's really a win-win to just kind of keep it going. So AAC, I often tell people to keep the first visit really, really simple. Show them how to hide buttons on that first visit. Show them what aided language stimulation looks like, which is just really a fancy term for modeling. We're modeling language using the device, and that's really, when you boil aided language stimulation down, that's really what it is. It does require an SLP to kind of be on the plan, or at least be supporting on the plan, and I'm going to talk about that here for a second. So at Butler County, we've seen some success in the way that we implement using AAC and exploring AAC. The PSP is often the developmental specialist, and then they're using coaching from myself or another SLP on their zone. to model language or to come up with like what should be put on the device, the grid size, maybe a good jumping off point. And then in between visits, that primary service provider is checking up on the strategies that they discussed with the SLP, maybe in that first introductory visit with us. And then they bring questions and coaching back to our weekly team meeting. And that way, all of the developmental specialists get the opportunity to hear those questions. They might have that same question. And then sometimes they'll just call me. And that's another way that I try to provide some support without directly having to be in the home, because we can be stretched quite thin. And then I will often also try to establish communication with their private speech therapy. If they're implementing a device in private therapy, then we should be implementing the same thing at home. So really building and increasing that communication between our program and the private therapy it's really, really important that we do that. Also, the SLP is required for most insurance companies. SLP is required to write the AAC evaluation to get the device funded through insurance. And I can talk a little bit about that too. But when you're exploring the option of introducing AAC in your county, or if your SLPs are interested in that, a lot of companies offer free trainings. They're not just available to SLPs, they're available to developmental specialists as well. A lot of these companies have been around for a really long time. Highly recommend the ones that I've written on here. They're a great resource. Lingraphica is a great resource for older individuals. So if you work with or know older individuals, we've had some SSAs at our board kind of reach out and ask for guidance on using AAC with older individuals, and they're a great resource because they'll provide some of the evaluation for that. Obviously, we're exploring and talking about AAC at our coaching, weekly coaching in our zones. And I think developmental specialists, in addition to the speech therapists and sometimes the occupational therapists, they're just integral to how carryover happens in the home. They build these great relationships with families, I think, and then bridge that gap between me coming in with the AAC expertise and then them having the expertise on the family. We really get to work together. So I think that's great. When I think a lot of people also have questions about the IFSP process when we're adding AAC. I've always coached my particular team to use AAC as an expressive language strategy in that strategy section. Obviously, the outcome itself has expressive communication elements, what the child will say. Maybe they will protest, or maybe they will request, that kind of thing. And I try to help guide based on what the parent is looking for too. So it's really just working with the parent, working with the developmental specialist on the team, and putting all of our ideas together and using AAC as a strategy and exploring different options for apps as well. So if you're interested in bringing AAC to your county, I kind of outlined a few options here. And it's pretty straightforward. You can purchase iPads with apps. This I'm making sound a lot easier than it really is. But this is really the generic step for it. You can explore what apps you want to start with, but I would recommend starting with more than one. So it's just kind of a general outline. Obviously, just the reminder in step 4 that SLP does need to be included in the entire process, because we have, specific training and the data collection and the monitoring for progress that would need to be included in the funding portion. We also have other options we're bringing AAC to your county that doesn't require a chunk of change up front. So you can obtain lending devices through various companies. These are more private companies, right? So one of them is a company that Butler County has used quite often. It's AbleNet. AbleNet allows us to trial the Quick Talk or Freestyle. And then on that Freestyle, we can put an app of the parents' choosing. So this is an option. If you have questions on that, my email will be at the end. Please reach out. We have also gotten funding in early intervention for specific families through their insurance, through Medicaid, through grants. I list a few of the grants on here. We also used FSS money in the past by purchasing refurbished iPads and covering one app for the family after we had trialed them. So there are just many options available, and I just want to make you aware of all of them. If you have any questions about AAC, please reach out. I love talking about it, so I'd be happy to help. Thank you.